So the main thing that people are going to consider when investing into the United Kingdom for preservation of wealth, for security, and for something that's going to last for the long term, it's that you can purchase 100% of the freehold as a foreign national. Now, around Southeast Asia, areas such as Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong, Jakarta, all of these locations around Asia, when investing into fairly local markets, you have to be a local resident or have a majority local ownership generally to purchase those properties. Now, there are exceptions, such as Singapore, for example. In Singapore, a way as a foreign national to be able to purchase, but that way of purchasing property as a foreign national investing in Singapore is that you have to pay a 60% tax premium on top of the value of the property. So for example, let's say you purchase a property in Singapore for £1 million, or let's call it $1 million Singaporean dollars. You have to pay a 60% premium on top, meaning that you actually pay 1.6 million for a property that's worth 1 million. Now, the benefit of Singapore is there is zero inheritance tax. So you could look at Singapore as a place to store your wealth if that's something that you're looking to do. And if you don't really want the inheritance tax, so if you want to pay that tax up front, then it could be a smart move. The alternative is, though, with the United Kingdom, is that you can purchase 100% of the freehold as a foreign national, and then you pay the inheritance tax at the end. Now, the inheritance tax, I'm not a tax advisor, but the inheritance tax, from what I've seen online, is 40%. Now, there are ways in which it can be reduced. There are creative ways, and I do actually know people that can really support with this. But it's very important to consider that in most places of the world, wherever you look to invest, there is going to be some level of inheritance tax. Now, we also know that the United Kingdom, in terms of property investment, we could title them as legacy assets because there is security. The funds that actually are within this country are very strong, they're solid, and it's one of the strongest currencies in the world, the fourth strongest currency in the world to be exact. The currency as well, GDP, the pound sterling, is also highly liquid in terms of the depth of liquidity that the country has. It's one of the financial districts of the world, especially when you consider London. It's one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And when considering generational wealth, it's a very, very safe bet. Now, it's important to consider with this arrangement and with the United Kingdom, the fact that you can purchase 100% of the freehold as a foreign national. And yes, there's going to be some inheritance tax, but you can actually pass it on through several generations. You can purchase the property now, and your kids could inherit that in 50 years, 70 years, 100 years' time, however long you're lucky enough to live. And then your children could own that asset. And then another 80, 90, 100 years later, they're unfortunately going to pass away as well. But their children will inherit that asset. And then the children of your children will inherit the asset. And it will go on forever, for as long as that asset is owned by your family. Now, here's some things to consider with other markets. Now, yes, you could potentially look at investing into Indonesia, for example. But with Indonesia, you either need to own the freehold by having a local ownership or by setting up a company and putting the property in somebody else's name, which isn't, I wouldn't advise that at all because it's going to cause many, many problems down the line. With investing into Bali, for example, fantastic for cash flow. But the problem that you have is you're purchasing leases. Now, when considering leases, especially in Bali, I know there's a lot of leases that are around 25 years. It's actually a depreciating asset. And when you look at the lease, you purchase now for 200,000. When it drops below kind of 15 years, it's going to be much less desirable. And yes, the leases can be extended just like anywhere else, but there's a cost that's going to come as a result of doing that. The same happens with leasehold properties in the United Kingdom. You could purchase something that is an off-plan development. You could purchase it for, let's say, £100,000, and when you actually collect the keys, it's worth about £150,000 because you might have a 10 to 15% reduction on the purchase, and then you've got the growth over a 4 to 5 year period. So with that, you've got the gain, yes, but maybe you only purchase a property that's got a 99-year lease. So it's fine for your lifetime, and it's going to be fine for maybe your children. But you own that lease, and that lease is depreciating, and then someone's going to need to extend it. Now, to extend it, you need to pay for solicitors, you need to pay for all the relevant paperwork. It's a timely process, it's a stressful process, and it can be very costly. And the other thing is, it's not in your control. Something could happen, rules could change, things could happen where you're actually not able to do something so streamlined. So it's just important to consider it. I'm not trying to put anybody off. I'm just sharing my opinions openly and talking a little bit about what I think is, to my core, the best investment strategy for the United Kingdom. And that is to invest into something which is in the countryside, which is a strong asset, which has land, where you purchase the freehold. So you are 100% the owner. And then with that, you can use it as a service accommodation unit or as a short-term holiday let. So that short-term holiday let means you don't have any tenants. So the renters reform changes that are coming in do not count, essentially, because there is no tenants, it is guests. We also recommend that you work with good management companies. Now, those management companies that we trust are people that work with professional, trained, qualified cleaners that do regular inspections on the properties, that can manage the bookings, and also that really provide a holiday experience for people. Now, you might be saying to me, Connor, my children don't want property in the United Kingdom. Okay, maybe they don't want property in the United Kingdom. That's absolutely fine. They could potentially take the property on and inherit it from you, and if they don't want it, it's going to be very easy to sell it on. There's other people in similar situations to you guys that are watching this video that are looking to invest because they want to diversify their portfolios. So in the United Kingdom, there's always going to be buyers. There's a lot of noise right now about people exiting the market, but those people that are exiting the market are generally local people that have got a portfolio that are relying on that portfolio for income and not looking at it from a perspective of wealth preservation. Now, here's another thing that you can consider. If your kids are very much saying, we don't want property in the United Kingdom, you can invest into property in the United Kingdom now, but then sell it down the line, benefit from the capital growth, and also use it as a short-term holiday let right now, generating you extra income. And in my opinion, it's much, much better to do that than it is to invest into gold, for example, or to stocks and shares, or, especially cryptocurrency, because you have control of what's going on. You can force up the value if you wanted to. You can do improvements to boost the value. You can sell it if you wanted to. And although the liquidity isn't quite as liquid as gold, it's something where you can get the capital appreciation the same as you would with gold based on relying on the economy, but you actually get the cash flow from that property as well. Now, there are some other things to consider with investments into different countries. For example, with Dubai, there's one thing to consider when it comes to supply and demand. There is a huge oversupply of properties, and there is also a huge demand. So I'm sure in Dubai that supply is going to be fulfilled. But we know that developers are constantly building. We know that there's a lot of money going to Dubai, and we know that there's a lot of people that are looking to develop because it's a place where you can benefit from the tax rules. Another thing to consider is with the United Kingdom, the supply and demand is actually very favorable for investors right now. There is a huge undersupply of properties, meaning that people need places to live. Now, from what I would advise is, you can look to supply that demand, but consider the UK as somewhere to store the wealth and look to fulfill that demand, but only do it if it aligns with your goals. And there are other ways in which it's going to be easier, because I understand that with the renters' rights and with tenants and everything like that, it is a real challenge. It takes a lot of courage, and there would be a lot of potential problems if for whatever reason a tenant didn't pay. My recommendation is to look at properties with low crime rates, with low deprivation, and to look at properties where you are going to benefit from capital growth, and you can use that property to support people that need short-term stays that are working in a countryside. For example, the Lake District or the Peak District. Maybe people are working in a project out there and they need to stay there for a couple of months, but they don't really want to stay in a hotel. They want to stay in somewhere that they can call their own. This can work for that market. And also, if for whatever reason you was to visit the United Kingdom, you've also got a place to stay. If your family was to go to the United Kingdom, they've got a place to stay. So there's lots of benefits with this strategy that I'm proposing. Another thing to consider when looking at markets around Asia, for example, with Thailand. Thailand in areas like Bangkok, Pattaya, Phuket, many different locations where there are properties available. You can purchase them and you would get good growth because it's a growing market, mainly due to the tourism. But you will have to purchase the property in a creative way. You have to purchase the property using a local person's name because of the majority ownership rules, meaning that, again, you can't purchase 100% of the freehold. Now, you might decide to then purchase the leasehold, but then you have to have the majority ownership of the leasehold, whether that's of the development itself. Like in Philippines, for example, some developers allow, in a development where there's 100 units, for example, the majority ownership being of the entire tower. So 51 units could be owned by a local person and 49 units could be owned by a foreign national. That's fine. Bringing it back to Thailand, people can purchase the properties using someone else's name. And although, yes, that solves the problem, I don't recommend it moving forwards, because with people that purchase properties in Thailand and use somebody else's name, that person could then run away. That person could separate from you and they've got the property in their name, meaning that they can actually take it away from the person that put in the funds to purchase that property. And I know that this is a growing concern because the suicide rate of men in Pattaya, specifically in Thailand, has increased significantly for this reason. People purchasing units there, living there for a short while, coming into some disputes with their partner, and then that partner taking the property with them, leaving the person that invested their funds into that property with next to nothing. So that's a little bit of my knowledge and my insight on overseas markets, and why I strongly encourage people that are looking for security and for wealth preservation to consider the United Kingdom and to look at purchasing something that really fits their criteria.